And I think one of the things that has been a recurring issue is the challenge around actually being able to understand business and the way business thinks. So this is kind of a reflection in relation to that. I have a recurring issue around people doing a lot of analysis and preparing a lot of stuff for moving forward and then ending up not doing it. Now, if you love this session, then sooner or later, take a screen dump, share it on LinkedIn, tell people how amazing it was, because this is actually part of something bigger. But before we can move into it, I think part of the story that I've had with the conversation is really about how people and organizations have a tendency to be extremely inconsistent in how they work. And there's this old fable by Aesop from back in the ancient Greeks that talk about the race between the hare and the tortoise. And in the story, the hare is mocking the tortoise for being so slow, because it can run circle around it, and it's kind of, are you really moving anywhere? Is anything happening? And it can move super fast, but then they challenge the tortoise to a race, and the tortoise says yes. And the hare is doing so amazingly, it's just pushing forward, that it decides that it can relax, and so it falls asleep under a tree. And while it's sleeping under the tree, the tortoise moves past it and just slowly moves forward. There's a couple of things like that. The hare then wakes up and sees the tortoise is ahead, and then it races and comes ahead, and then it falls asleep again. And in the end, the tortoise wins the race. And then the idea of this is not it is partly that slow and steady wins the race, and doing things in burst does not necessarily is not necessarily a good solution. But it's really this idea about having that if you the time when you stop is actually not just about stopping, it's also about other things passing you by. So there's this entire story about momentum that we can put into this. So I'm Sten, a senior partner, co-founder at an agency in Copenhagen called IH Nordic. I've been doing this for 20-ish years. What sets me apart is that I am commercial, in the sense that I think a lot about the business, a lot more than I think about the data. There is 10,000 people out there that is better than tracking, but there is only, well, I don't know how many who would be better at actually thinking commercially about how to activate the data. And today it will be less about how to activate the data and more about the process and how to approach the data, and, well, more than just the data, because this is in basically a way about how organizations operate in a large sense. And I think some of you will be able to nod appropriately at the right times. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can use the QR code here. I am a nerd in the sense that I have, through the years, gone from being an extreme practitioner and being a Google Analytics trainer and training staff at Google in using Google's platform, including Google Analytics, to today, where I'm moving much more on a strategical level, but still sparring with clients around the Google Analytics roadmap and what is there. We're also looking at Amplitude today and Pivot, and data is more like just a food for making stuff happen. But enough about me. Let's move forward. So in the 20 minutes or the 14 minutes we have left, I'll try to dive into the cost of inaction. What is it actually? What is it that we need to be aware of? How can we see this cost of inaction? What are the decisions and barriers in relation to move forward around this? And basically why we need to move quick and break stuff, and why it's not as dangerous as it seems, right? Yes. So this is a session which is part of something bigger. I am doing a Maven cohort around urgency and how to create an urgency mindset so we actually get some stuff done. It's kind of the thing why the opposite thing of why do today what you can postpone to tomorrow, and saying what is it that we need to get done today to actually make stuff to happen, both again, both personally maybe, and but also in the corporate world. So one of the old rules that we come across very often that we've been confronted with is this: if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So if it's working, leave it alone. And I think this is kind of a problematic mentality, saying if something isn't broken, then we don't have to look at it, because it kind of goes against the idea that things could be better today than they are, right? So a lot of what we'll be talking about is saying, well, even if it ain't broken, still fix it or see if you can make it better. So that's the mentality that will give you the acceleration that it has the potential. So the cost of inaction. There was actually a quote in the beginning that I elegantly skipped by this guy. Meister Eckhart said this in 1260. Well, he didn't say it in 1260, probably said it around 1300. The price of inaction is far greater than the cost of making a mistake. But still, we see a lot of us stopping us from moving forward and being stuck in this inaction. So diving into inaction, and this is kind of the core problem, saying we're sitting working with stuff in organizations, and very often we come up with an analysis or recommendation, and then it's getting pinned to the border, it's getting put aside, it's getting, yeah, we're going to look this at the next quarter, and nothing really happens. Now, the cost of inaction is kind of pushing against this, because there's this idea that waiting does not have a cost. That if we just stick around and if we don't do anything, there is no cost related to that. That the cost doesn't come until we start doing something. But the challenge is that the moment we know that we could do something better, by not doing it, we're actually not getting the full value. And I came across this wonderful model that kind of goes in and shows how many different places that we potentially could get impacted by doing nothing, right? So this there's this entire thing in relation to saying, okay, we know we have a problem with technical debt, and by not fixing it, sure, things will work, but we still have the cost of inaction is that the cost of correcting the technical debt will grow. It could be, again, regulatory and compliance risk. By not addressing these, we will still be facing a problem down the line, and even worse in a lot of cases. But on a lot of these things, it's really tied to something that is something different. It's also the potential gain that we could get out of something we're not getting, and the ability for us to continue and having the competitive advantage. Because what we do by not doing something is actually we give ourselves a competitive disadvantage. And if we look at this in the classic example, these cases have all been flogged until they were unrecognizable, and saying, yeah, Blockbuster got outcompeted because somebody smarter came and did something with Netflix, and Kodak killed themselves because they got outcompeted by iPhones and digital cameras, and BlackBerry got outcompeted by iPhone as well. So the challenge here is that in a lot of cases, these companies actually all did something, but they did is, what sets these companies apart basically is that two of them did something and one of them didn't, right? And BlackBerry never really tried to change their way. They tried to continue doing the same thing all the time, where Blockbuster and Kodak actually both tried to change the way, but too late, right? Kodak was actually the first company in the world that produced a digital camera, but they were so afraid of cannibalizing their own business in relations to the production of or the creation of images, photos, that they held back the digital camera until it was too late to launch something. So they actually went out and launched a digital camera, but way after everybody else had done it. And the same for Blockbuster. Everybody talks about how Blockbuster got the opportunity to buy Netflix. But what business was it that Blockbuster actually got the chance to buy? They got the opportunity to buy the Netflix send movies. And Blockbusters actually launched something similarly afterwards. So they actually launched something, the model back in the first days of Netflix was actually, you would go online, you would order your movie and it would be sent to you in the mail as a DVD. And then you would have the movie and you would send it back. And when they got the movie back, then they will send you the new one, right? And that was the core business of Netflix before they started streaming. And that was the thing that Blockbuster tried to catch up to. But when they failed on that and when they failed on streaming as well, then they died. So it wasn't really a problem about not doing anything for two of these companies. It was about doing something too late. And with BlackBerry, it was actually doing nothing and hoping that things would just survive and being a brand. And there's probably somebody in the audience who have seen the BlackBerry movie that will tell me, well, they actually tried a lot of stuff, but this is my knowledge on the area. Now, the key thing in this, and what we can actually use these three examples on is saying, if we want to make sure that something happen, then we need to focus on momentum and saying, what is it that pushes us forward? Because we don't, inaction is really defined differently in a lot of different organizations. So you can be, today, if you're not doing AI, everybody will say it's a disaster. Well, it depends on what industry you're in, because it depends on if you want to be perceived as moving, then you just have to move more than your competition, right? And that's kind of the key thing here, saying that the cost of inaction is the cost we pay for not being faster than the rest of the market. Now, if we take this thinking and then we look at kind of some of the decisions and barriers in this place and what is really holding people back. Because if we can agree that doing nothing is a problem and that we should do something, then why don't we do something? And it's really the classic thing that in most situations, we, like this poor rabbit, get stuck in the opportunity of saying, okay, we can either fight, flight, or freeze. And since freeze is the worst thing that we can do, and it basically say, okay, we can choose to fight or we can choose flight, but freezing is not the optimal solution, because that is the solution that will basically hurt us and delay us most. So if we freeze, then we leave the initiative to the other guys. And in this case, they will depend on the driver of the car, and we're losing control over the situation. Whereas if we fight or flight, we actually take a responsibility in relation to what is going on. So why is freezing even an option? Well, freezing becomes an option because it's a challenge in relations to trying to understand risk versus uncertainty in the given situation. So And I think this, for me, when I came across this is really interesting because it says that risk and uncertainty are basically two ends of the same scale. So one is uncertainty, its probabilities and outcomes are unknown. And with risk, then we know the probabilities and the outcomes. So in a lot of situations, the reason why we don't do something is actually tied to these things, right? And in most cases, we have some knowledge of probabilities and some knowledge of outcomes, but it becomes a complexity because we can't really balance the two against each other. So it takes way too much time to kind of get them in place. Because in an ideal situation, what we get is this, right? We're able to go in and what is the probability of us technically having a success and what is the reward of the activity. And then we can basically place the activities in these four different corners saying, okay, high probability of success. We have but a high probability of success, but a low reward. Well, that's bread and butter. That is just stuff we need to get done because that's good. We have the high probability of success and a high reward. That's pearls. We're stupid if we don't pick them up. Oysters, it's low probability of success and a potential for high reward. So it could be successful, but there's a high, we're not really sure that it will be a success. And then of course, we have all the projects that are low probability of success and a low reward, which is basically something we should avoid because it's really difficult to get anything out of that. And with this, it seems really simple because any situation we're in, we can say, okay, what is the probability of success and what will we get out of it? Now, the challenge is that we combine these things, right? Because we have uncertainty and measurability on the same side. So if we cannot measure something, then it becomes more uncertain. The more we can measure, the less risk we have, or the more risk we have, but risk, again, is the good thing, right? But in this space, we kind of go in and say, well, measurability, and the more measurability we have, the more control we have over the decision. But uncertainty, things we don't know, is what increases the risk. So by adding uncertainty to this model, we basically end up in a situation where we don't know what the outcomes are. The probability of technical success drops to the bottom. So everything becomes uncertain. So we don't really know if it's a white elephant or pearl or bread and butter or anything. We just know that there's something. So we lose one of the dimensions in being able to make the decision. And that means we postpone it. We are not making any decisions if we don't know the likelihood. So we'll push it aside under the assumption that we'll get better data at one point. The problem is that by postponing it, we're paying for the cost of inaction. So what should we be doing? Well, it's really getting this sense of urgency saying, okay, if the assumption is that we need to do something, then what is it that we're supposed to do? And doing nothing is not an option. So the first thing we need to understand is that the information we have, the data we have, has a half-life. So any insight we have has the highest value right when we gather it. So data will not get better by waiting. It will lose value. So we need to make the decision if we want tactical or operational value out of the data, then we need to act as soon as possible because the value of the data drops. If I know that somebody is in the market for something now, then it doesn't help me waiting because the likelihood of them having fulfilled their need further down the line. So any situation right now, we have two options. So we can either say, okay, we can get more data so we can get a better understanding, or we can decide now. And that's kind of where we flip to a very classic thinking model, which is centered around the Amazon and Jeff Bezos model, where we have this distinction between one-way and two-way doors. Now, the one-way door is a decision that we can make, but we cannot unmake it. And the two-way door is we can make it and we can, but we can also change it, right? So they actually taken this model and then broke it down into saying, okay, there's actually 4 options here, because we have this, one of them, the one-way and the two-way door is the one-way door is if the decision is irreversible. The two-way door is if the decision is reversible. And then on the sides, then we have how important is this decision? Is it inconsequential? It doesn't really matter. Or is it consequential? It's critical in relation to the business. So we get these 4 dimensions. So a thing that is irreversible but inconsequential. So I'm sending somebody an email. I cannot unsend that email, but it's not that important. I need to make that decision as inexpensively as possible. I will send the email. I will think about it, but I will not spend a lot of energy on it. On the lower hand side, if it's inconsequential and irreversible, I need to make it happen as fast as possible. The only value on that is speed. Now, flipping to the consequential side, so we have one of them is saying prioritization of a roadmap. Well, that is something we have to give some time. So we need to make sure that we usually make the right decision. So because a roadmap is still something we can change, it's not locked in steel, but before we push it forward, then we need to double check the decision. Now, the other thing is going back and looking at something big like the location of a factory or investing in SAP or getting a new long-term partner in relation to a product. That is a decision that we have to spend more time in making the right decision always. But you can see the difference in these 4 types of decisions. But right now, what happens in most organizations due to this one is that we have a tendency to push all decisions like it's something we have to optimize for quality. So we're spending way too much time on making sure that we're making the right decision always, but it's not important. So by having the focus up there, then we overspend energy in making the right decisions. Now, if we want to be the rabbit that actually beats the hare, no, we want to be the rabbit that actually beats the tortoise. Then it's pretty simple, because we kind of have to reflect on the decisions in relations to pushing forward. And the best way to reduce uncertainty is with data, right? The best place in relation to the model and define the rewards are with having good targets. And then consider when we're moving forward, is this a one-way or two-way door? And I hope this kind of gives you some idea in relation to this. This is the end, but not the end. I hope for me, it's been another type of presentation. I'll probably do it better next time, but I hope you got inspired and have some consideration. And I really hope that you like the presentation and follow me on LinkedIn. You love the presentation and subscribe to my newsletter. And you were absolutely blown away by the presentation and join the Maven cohort. Now, a cohort is something different, because a cohort is actually where we have slides like this, but we discuss them afterwards and you come with your input and I give you some reflections to do at home in the meantime. But I hope you're ready to continue your adventure and join me moving forward. So guys, thanks for your amazing day. I hope I haven't overspent your time completely. So hope to see you on the other side. So long for now, and see you out there.